Welcome back to the Music Theory Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you'd like us to analyze next.
Okay, welcome back. It's been a while. Certainly.
It has, yes.
And I just looked into our channel. We still have a pretty stable, although somewhat small following. So we should pay them back for their
loyalty, their commitment. Yeah.
Commitment. So I'm going to do something I very often did before. I'm going to play you some music. And I'd like to just ask you for anything, for any feedback to that music. It's going to be two...
Any feedback?
Yeah. So it's going to be two slices of music, essentially. So
two slices, okay.
Second one. Okay.
All right. Okay, so, well, both pieces are piano pieces.
True.
Both pieces are most likely 20th century. Both pieces rely heavily on pedal and on an idiom that I would call post-impressionistic or something like that. There is an obvious difference between the two. The second one had a lot more functional features. The second one, they were not using the same device to blur out tonality, basically. If we assume that the goal here is to blur out tonal features, the first one was using dissonances that you might not be able to order immediately.
Mm-hmm.
There were seconds, but that did resolve in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And which gave me the feeling of tonality in the end. But there was also this process of sliding up, like having suddenly a chord one semitone higher, stuff like that. In the second one, I would say the device was a pedal note. So you really had a pedal note for a long time in the bass. And then you had something that seems like a turnaround. The reason why I still think this is 20th century, because from harmonically speaking, you could almost say it could be classical, but I would say the pedal, both in the sense of the pedal of the piano and also the pedal note, are kind of, let's say, not characteristic for classical era or even for romantic. Maybe for some romantic passages, but somehow I had a feeling it was the same, maybe the same piece even, but just different passages of the same piece.
You got me there.
Yeah, I really don't know the piece though, so it was really a lucky guess. But yeah, the fact that you had a lot of pedal and the fact that you had these notes not moving, and also sometimes I had a feeling that in the cadences in the second example, the metrical placement was not what's expected. I expected a cadence toward a certain goal, and then it went a fifth lower than I thought. So
The second
in the second one, yeah. In the first one, I mean, the first one was more of let's use this dissonant color and do some Debussy, and then suddenly, oh, there is actually a cadence. Like, so it was more the cadence that's surprising in the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a frame.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, that's uncanny. Actually, so it is post-impressionistic. You could throw in a name, maybe.
Okay, I have a suspicion because I know what you've been dealing with recently. Okay. So it could be Martineau. Is it Martineau?
Not quite.
Not quite. Okay.
So it's Prokofiev.
Prokofiev. Yeah, it makes sense. That sounds like something he could have written. Yeah.
And this is Op.65.
It's one of the children's songs. Okay.
Yeah, children or pieces for children, I think.
Yeah.
And it's written about 1935.
Okay. Yeah.
It's right in the same area where he wrote Peter and the Wolf. Do you say that in English? I'm not sure.
I guess, yes.
Possibly.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And it's called The Rain and Rainbow. So let's look at this piece. Or maybe we should hear it first.
Okay.
In the whole, but with the score, I would say.
Okay.
So let's start with the form. This is pretty simple. It's ABA.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got 8 bars, A, and then the very sort of famous theme, you could say, which is also 8 bars long. And it's actually a period.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
2 bars A of the period, and then 2 bars B and A prime, then and B prime. So actually a perfect period. So nothing wrong about that.
Well, there was this one thing that I thought sounded a bit odd and not quite classical, was in bar 16th, when the cadence does go to C major. Yeah. Because I had a feeling it would either really stabilize G or do a semi-cadence again somehow, but here he just goes to C, and it doesn't really fit. I mean, it fits in his language, there is no problem, right?
For classical.
Yeah, for earlier. That's kind of what gave it away for me earlier. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things that gave it away, not the only one, but one of them.
Sure, I would say it probably would help if he would use D minor instead of D major.
Yeah,
the second probably. Time. Then you wouldn't have this rather strange phenomenon that you have a very stable double dominant. In classical style, you should have at least a much more unstable sound as a secondary dominant.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. And of course, then just 6 bars now, A prime, just kind of a condensed version of the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Now we talked about this wonderful tonal theme, and it is really a totally different world, harmonically speaking, right? And that's pretty much what he wants to do, I guess. And so what I find interesting was how he uses different like 20th century techniques to, as you said, to sort of destabilize the tonality. We start with this very dissonant cluster. That's like the first part of it. Then you go to a whole tone trichord, maybe you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And this one sort of resolves a bit like chromatic neighbor notes into another whole tone cluster with comprising 4 notes. But this one is actually supported by 3 Gs. And so I would say you already hear a dominant here with some options, you know, with a 9 and a 7. And this is nicely done because you use whole tone structures which are, because of their symmetry, quite atonal in the sense, not traditionally in the tonality. And you use that as a voicing for a dominant, right?
Yeah.
So that you basically, if that's not too much interpretation, you basically go from a 2nd degree, which is just the tone D, and this tone is attacked by E flat and C sharp, and then you go to the 5, which is basically a semi-cadence.
Mm-hmm.
And then you try again, right? And you actually fulfill the promise. You go to the C major, to the tonic.
Yeah.
And these are the 3 parts which comprise the first 4 bars: dissonant cluster, whole tone structure, and then cadence. Basically, you start in a very dissonant manner, and then you go much more into consonances, right? So this is also kind of a spectrum. When you repeat, or you don't really repeat the first 4 bars, but you have references to the first 4 bars and the second 4 bars. Mm-hmm. So the whole tone trichord is now a pentatonic structure based on G flat. So it's not a whole tone scale anymore. And this again resolves to this dominant voicing again. And so you have a cadence. So you kind of reduce the elements. You only have 2 and 3 now. You don't have element 1 anymore. So it's kind of already maybe an epilogue, maybe a thematic process.
But to me, this is brilliant as a children piece who play piano and discover piano sounds, because it's actually written with the topology of the keyboard in mind, right? Because actually,
I'm pretty sure about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this opposition between black keys and white keys.
Yeah.
Right? All these clusters, this pentatonicism is simply clusters on the black keys, and the name Rain and Rainbow is actually very well found, because then you could imagine that the black keys are always the clouds or something that obscures the tonal rainbow, right? The really pretty C major rainbow that you want to see through the gaps of the rain.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. Yeah.
Prokofiev does something really good with this, because you have a piece that's easy to learn in terms of haptical feeling, like tactile feeling on the keyboard. Yeah. And at the same time, that explains to a child tension and resolution. with a poetic metaphor. That's brilliant. Very well made.
Yeah, I tried. I would have made this point later, but not as well put. So it's good that you elaborated. I also had this idea in mind. I also thought maybe it's a bit like children play on a piano, right? They repeat a tone and then they see, oh, adjacent to this tone, we've got these two black keys, right? And what happens when I press these? Something like that. A very important dimension of the piece.
Yeah, extremely.
Basically, what will happen after we have this perfect, nice period, we have kind of a comprised A part, right? So again, the sharp dissonances, but now we already have a cadence in bar 18. So it's more like an epilogue to the whole piece. At least the first 4 bars, you've got two times the cadence, and then there's an epilogue, another cadence, so third cadence, with this very romantic chromatic neighboring notes to C major. So D sharp goes to E, F sharp to G. So this is kind of a romantic flavor in that piece. Apart from that, I think it's not so much, there's not so much romanticism. It reminds me just a little bit of these Burgmüller pieces, a bit like this, right? So you have just in terms of that you really use the whole range of the piano. So this is maybe also a romantic trait in this piece, or romantic legacy. I think we covered very much, but just one addition. You already tried to interpret the piece in a tone painting kind of meaning, right?
Yeah.
And actually, the thing you said, nobody, I think, mentioned that before. I think it makes sense actually with the sort of the clouds and the dissonances and the black keys. So that's a new addition actually to this theory. I'd like to quote Peter Daniel Klein. This is actually an open source article. It is a tone painting. I believe that the tapping eighth note rhythms and chord clusters represent raindrops. The tonal movement of the piece is akin to an arc and maybe a representation of a rainbow. I had also this idea in mind that the B part, because it really goes from the top to the very bottom, it's like a, really like a rainbow in the sky, which you see all over across the horizon. Yeah. That's what I found tone painting wise, but this idea with the clouds is also very nice.
Yes, and I mean the raindrops, why not, right? The tapping with the Ds, it makes sense. Also the fact that it covers all keyboard, like it's not just that it goes from the top to the bottom melodically, but also the bass is really low, right? Yeah. So I know from my memories as a child playing piano, you don't go that low so often in your early years. So when you play notes that low, it's kind of an event, right? So definitely, yeah, there is this idea of a wide arc in also even the way you have to move your arms, right? Yeah, just to reach these notes. So yeah, it's a very well crafted piece for children.
Really short. I mean, just 22 bars, right?
Yes, or you don't necessarily need more.
Yeah, true. For the last part of our episode, I'd like to introduce some other quotations which might enlighten us regarding the piece and maybe Prokofiev's style in general. Okay. Still the same source. This is actually Prokofiev himself quoted in the article. In all that I write, I have two leading principles: clarity in the expression of my ideas and economy of expression, the avoidance of everything superfluous in expressing them. I think we tapped into that first by saying it's incredibly short, there's no material which is sort of used for just expanding the scope of the piece. And I think you also see that in this extremely dense sort of setting. So you don't have so many notes. In the beginning, you just have one note and then two others. So it's very parsimonious, right? In terms of what he actually uses. And he almost never uses full chords. I mean, he has to use these clusters, but when he has triadic sounds, it's very often just a sixth, like here.
Yeah.
Or basically just an implication of triads by having these. You shouldn't do that in your counterpoint lesson. That is a counterpoint lesson.
Yes. Well.
Anti-parallels, I guess, in English. Anti-parallel.
Yeah.
So for me, this is like he tries to reduce the elements to their core essence, right? So the essence of a tonal cadence, you can express that in certain ways. For example, just having these root notes going to the next root note in this example. But also this one, the tritone resolving to a sixth.
Yeah.
Which is for some authors, like I think Jean-François Fétis, right?
Yeah.
He sees in this tritone the whole point of tonality, right? The core and the essence of tonality, having this tritone dissonance which resolves into a tonic. So also here a reduction to its essences.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean here, of course, you can talk of economy in terms of pianistic means because you're writing for children. So there is not, it's brief and it's not very difficult, right? You don't have any virtuosity in terms of technique, right? It's very economical in this sense as well.
Yeah. Part of the economy also lies within the specialty of the genre, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's possibly no mistake that Prokofiev is most successful in his music for children, right? Peter and the Wolf. So this was where he was at his best, at least regarding public acclaim, right? Another quotation about form. Prokofiev's style was neoclassical in theory and form, although he avoided that label. In form, he believed that sonata allegro, binary and ternary forms to be elastic enough to do anything one might need in music. I mean, that's, again, it's so short. It's a piece for children. It fits to the quotation, but it reminded me also of, and maybe I'm on uncertain territory, but it reminded me of Schumann also. So Schumann's approach to form is also, I think, very reduced to very essential forms. And the most interesting parts are not which form are you using or how do you deal with the form in the intricate ways classical composers like Mozart and Haydn did. But it's rather how you fill the form. It's rather about the content. So and the last point is maybe the most controversial regarding eclecticism. When he was abroad during his first period, he made it very clear that he would adopt many different techniques to accomplish what suited him. It was his belief that if an artist formulates a single logical formula under which to operate, he limits himself. Now, the same sentence could be also have a negative implication, right? So some of the criticism people like Prokofiev were confronted with was this kind of, easy eclecticism, right? Just throwing things together from different styles. And now there is a very whole range of styles, right? So you have this Impressionism and you have basically a very classical form. You have some Romanticisms here. So I would just give that back to you maybe as a question. How is your judgment about multi-stylistic composing?
Well, in this case, I think it works very well. I think the danger is usually that you would end with some sort of collage of pieces that don't really fit together. In this case, what I see is more a way of bringing tonality and putting it in scene in such a way that it takes a new meaning, a new value, right? You have a type of music, which in this case is simple tonal music, and you bring it in the middle of much more dissonant, much more new, in a way, elements. And both these things have their own connotations. And in the moment where you put them together like this, well, you remove this connotation, or at least you disrupt it in some way. And I think this disrupting of connotation and this invention of a new context is one of the essences of what great artists do. So I don't believe it's such a valid criticism in this case to attack him on this.
Yeah. So I mean, the quote wasn't a criticism, but I just said maybe there is generally this criticism out there, right? Not only Prokofiev, also Martinu and other composers as well, I guess.
Yes.
Sometimes are criticized for this feature of their this kind of always evolving or changing style of composition. What I noticed about when I thought about this sort of question of eclecticism was, in this piece you have all the elements combined in one effort, I think. So it's the whole piece is just a cadence. It's always trying to have a predominant sort of harmony field, and then the dominant, and then the tonic. And it is also quite uncanny, I think, that he has the most dissonant aspects, or the most dissonant harmonies he uses is in the predominant area, which is so much in the tradition, within the tradition of tonal music, right?
Yes, very much so. Ever since the Renaissance.
Yeah, and so this is really again a reduction also of, in this case, of a cadence of the idea of a cadence to its core meaning, and how you approach the problem of, let's say, tension and resolve in music in general. And that what also makes the piece, I think, so strong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so basically tonality is possible without diatonicism. That is like the message of the piece, or one message of the piece.
One of the messages, yeah. I think there are many.
One of the many messages.
Yeah.
Any closing statements, or maybe that was a closing statement?
No, maybe the closing statement could be, please play those pieces. Nobody plays them.
Yeah. I mean, even I could.
Yeah, I mean, what I mean is, yeah, they're easy to play. Play them, teach them. It's valuable music.
Okay, you should also do that in the next concert, right? You can
maybe I will
sneak in a little children piece from Prokofiev.
Beautiful encore, yeah.
Great. So we wanna have a more regular, right, approach to the videos, but we will sort it out if it's weekly or maybe every 2 weeks. We'll see. But
yes, yeah.
I guess
I also have some projects in mind that will come.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, so there's more to come in the future, definitely.